From the manual grind of half-inch tapes to building the high-speed systems that powered the London Stock Exchange, Adrian Smith's career tracks the very soul of the digital revolution. As a consultant who turned the school of hard knocks into a high-impact business strategy, he reveals why technical skill alone isn't enough to survive today's market. But what was the one accidental meeting that changed his perspective on the tech industry forever? Watch to find out how over-delivering on the impossible became his blueprint for leadership.
This message, going back to the people watching this, whether they're in a senior role or in a junior role, is you should really always do the job to the best of your ability, deliver and over-deliver wherever possible. However much you hate your work, people you work with, or the type of industry you're in, if you hate things that much, then move.
Yeah.
If you don't like the people you work with, move. If you're underperforming, ask yourself, are you in the right job? Because at the end of the day, you need to have a happy balance between the job you like doing and the life that you like to lead.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Leaders in Tech, where we're interviewing amazing business and technology leaders that are really changing the world with their strategies, their teams, their culture, enabling people to achieve their greatest potential. Today, we have Adrian Smith with us. He's coming back for his second episode. Last time, Adrian, welcome to the show to begin with.
Yeah, good afternoon, good evening. It's nice to see you again.
How's life in good old England these days?
Well, it's getting dark outside, so it's early evening for us, but we're having some unseasonably good weather. And as you know, for the British, the weather is the most important thing. So we're having a nice, lot of sunshine and dry weather at the moment.
That's wonderful. So for the audience to recap, Adrian, last time we talked about several things. We ended up talking about a bit of your background, but we didn't go too much into it. We talked about the value of experience of leadership, technology vulnerabilities, and modern software challenges. We talked about cybersecurity, system attacks. We also talked about COVID-19 and how remote work got affected with that, globalization, travel, and accelerated changes. We even talked about polarization and division in the digital age, privacy, surveillance, and government overreach. So we even got a little bit into politics, which is amazing, but we didn't get the chance to talk about you, which is the most important part.
Yeah.
So thank you for your time again. I promise it's not going to be too long, but let's focus on you, Adrian, because Leaders in Technology, the podcast is really the main objective is to help other CIOs, CTOs, other leaders in technology to have a different perspective in their management, their leadership style. But most important, for these people that are aspiring to be like you are, for the next generation that eventually will occupy our places. How do we pass on that knowledge that the Lord has allowed us to have through our mentors? So this is almost like a mentoring channel, right?
This podcast is brought to you by ISU Corp. Are you having trouble with your software projects? Is there a project that's taking too long or a technology you can't handle? We can help. We are ISU Corp, experts in custom software since 2005. With almost 20 years of experience, we can solve any technical problem from new businesses to satellite software. We've done it all. Let us turn your ideas into reality. Learn more about how we can help by visiting us at www.isucorp.ca. Your solution starts here.
So it's an honor to ask you, how was your career growth? So let's look back. I want to take you into a travel machine, and I want you to go back to the last year of high school. Where were you? What did you want to do? What happened to your life back then?
Well, my last year of high school, which I think equates to what we would call in the UK sixth form, so immediately before university, I was determined to become an acoustics engineer. Now, I should explain, I have real interest in music, but I was really keen to have the best audio setup and design the best audio setup. And so I felt that a career in that kind of engineering field was the best thing for me. And interestingly, there were only 2 universities in the world doing acoustical engineering degree. One in southern England, in Hampshire, in England, the University of Southampton, and the other, I believe, was in California, somewhere between Los Angeles and San Diego. There was a faculty of sound and vibration research. So I went to the University of Southampton because I had absolutely no idea what to expect in America. And at that point in time, I'd never even been abroad, believe it or not, at that age, 17. I went to the university and I found out that doing a degree in acoustical engineering has nothing to do with what I thought. It was to do with making things vibrate less. It was to do with making things quieter, like engines quieter, washing machines that didn't vibrate. And suddenly I wasn't so interested, to be really frank.
Right.
So that, coupled with the fact that I didn't quite get the right qualifications to go to do the thing I wanted to do at university, meant that I ended up with a summer job. That sort of classic summer holiday job as a computer operator. And this entailed loading tapes and distributing printouts. Now, some of your viewers will be aware of half-inch tape, and some of them will be aware of things like band-folded paper out of line printers. For some of them, or many of them, this will be completely new stuff. But at the time, a computer operator's job was to load tapes, unload tapes, run processes, and distribute printouts to all those people around the organization that didn't have a display unit or a computer on their desk. I found this job very good pay-wise for a summer job, very boring. I mean, incredibly boring. But I was given the opportunity. I had a mentor at that firm, who the managing director of that firm is an engineering firm. Now, the engineering firm was part of Hawker Siddeley. Your viewers around the world will probably know Hawker Siddeley because they built what was the Harrier jump jet, fighter jet. It's the jet that does vertical takeoff and landing.
Right. Amazing.
And we don't have any of those left in the UK now. We actually sold them to the USA, but that's another story.
I was built in the UK, right? That was a UK fighter, right?
Yeah, it was designed in the UK, prototyped here, and we had a whole squadron of them, or many squadrons of these VTOL planes. I mean, at the time, they were absolutely amazing plane, world-leading technology. And I worked for part of that company that built and designed that. But my mentor was a regional manager. And what he said to me was, well, I can see, Adrian, that you're bored. Write some reports, get some data out of that system for us. And this is where I'm going back to this, to your original point. I wasn't expecting to be writing reports. Now, these reports were of the form, very much like prompt engineering today. You would ask the database simple questions like sort, inventory, by fastest selling code. And it would list you everything by the fastest selling, whatever the fastest selling meant, stock turn rate, maximum income that day or across the week, and so on and so forth. I found it incredibly easy to write these prompts and get data out of the system. I made myself, in a couple of weeks, within that 8 weeks internship, totally invaluable to as many different people as possible. I would go around asking the head of sales, marketing, stock control, finance, do you want me to write you a report to give you any analysis? And they would say, oh, tell me this, tell me that, tell me the other. And I'd go away and I'd write the prompt and I'd get the data out. I'd sense check it and I'd give them their reports and they would say, wow, that's amazing. Well, actually, it wasn't amazing to me, but it was to them. It was a little bit like what we have today with AI's prompt engineering. If you know how to ask the question and you can be fairly certain the data behind the question is accurate and you know how to interpret the results to see whether the results are correct or totally incorrect, or what we call hallucination in AI, then you can write these reports, knock them off one or two a day, and suddenly everybody in the organization wanted you. I found myself sitting down with the heads of different teams and departments in conversations where they were asking me to add value. And this is where the IT person suddenly found he had a job, because although they knew the answers to the questions they wanted answers to, whether they were in sales, marketing, finance, whatever, HR, they didn't know or couldn't be bothered to know how to get those answers out of data. So I mined the data for them. And again, after that 8-week period, I found this was pretty boring, pretty straightforward stuff, but quite boring really in a way. And then an amazing thing happened. The guy said, well, do you want a full-time job? We'll put you on a management trainee program, which will last 3 years. It was the equivalent of going to university and getting paid.
That's amazing.
And of course, now you have to pay to go to university. In the UK in those days, you didn't have to pay. University education was free. I was really, really lucky to go through this process of building up a knowledge of business, because it was a business studies syllabus that I had to follow, being placed out with different parts of the organization, going to college, going to university to do some work, and then ending up with a qualification at the end of it. And all of this was utterly amazing. And at the end of that period, in Britain particularly, this kind of engineering was really, really under attack from better competing products from the Far East, particularly from Japan, and at the time. And so the company that I worked for ended up having to shrink, and I was offered relocation or redundancy. So I ended up taking redundancy. But I was really pumped up about the whole thing. I was really a bit too full of myself. I was really confident I could answer any questions. IT was something I could think about, walk around sleeping and thinking about it and all of that. My girlfriend at the time, who I had met at the beginning of this journey, who's incidentally now my wife, so we've been together quite a long time, didn't understand what I did. Neither did my mother and father. And this is important for later in the conversation. So I took redundancy, and I just got the bus home one night, and I happened to be standing by a bus stop to change buses, and there was an advertisement in a window for a data processing manager, as they were calling those days, IT manager, locally, relocating company from London, relocating down into the provinces, presumably to save costs. The job was offering a salary slightly better than I had. It was a bit easier to get to. It was for a Swiss watch manufacturing group who had relocated their London headquarters to where we were. And they were fabulously successful Swiss watch company. Historically, brands like Omega, Louis Brandt, Tissot, and Swatch. Now, many people remember Swatch as those plastic watches that they're about £50 plastic, but they with different colors and things. Well, it was the same company. And I suddenly found myself applying for this job and being offered this job all in the space of a couple of weeks. So I walked out of one job straight into another one.
Wow. But it was with training and your experience already. Isn't that amazing?
Well, you would think so. And I was hoping so. And I thought, well, I'm going to get in there, I'm going to write some reports, I'm going to do this. And I actually found myself sat in front of an IBM System 34, poorly documented system written by a software company in Switzerland. So the comments were in French, some were in Italian, some were in English, some were in German. I had to trawl through listing paper with all these programs to try and figure out what was going on, because there was no consistency in terms of documentation of the code, source code. And then it was in different languages. And they were used interchangeably in Switzerland because most people were multilingual,
right,
or they're in a team. I was wrestling with these pieces of code and recompiling them and trying to make them do different things and make them work better. I suddenly found I'd gone from a system incredibly up to date at an engineering company that was incredibly old fashioned to working for what I thought was a very up to date and modern jewelry business that actually had some of the most antiquated IT I could imagine. So this was a real trip to the school of hard knocks, because I found myself having to manage this system, take care of it, write reports. I struggled, actually. Perfectly honest, I struggled. I had to get my wife to sit with me in her kitchen, well, my girlfriend at the time, in her kitchen, going through and translating the comments from French and Italian into English for me. And what little I knew of German from school, I would translate that bit of it. And obviously, we both knew what the English comments. Well, they were in English, but they actually didn't often mean what an English person would normally write them to mean. So we struggled, my wife Liz and I struggled going through this source code, trying to make out what was going on and how I could fix it and how I could create new code and new reports. And I can tell you this, she got seriously annoyed with me at times.
I can imagine, right?
But it was a struggle. But here's the thing. I had nobody in that company to turn to for technical support we obviously didn't have news forums. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have real-time translation of things. So it was all a case of getting down and trying to figure it out line by line, old-fashioned. So Liz was, the first thing I learned there is that I couldn't take the English language for granted. I had to expect that sometime I would find something that wasn't in English. It was a bit of a shock for me. I'm a Brit. We're not very good at learning other people's languages. We kind of think we invented English, therefore everybody should speak it. I mean, we're a bit like that. I mean, rightly or wrongly, it's a curse and it's a gift for an Englishman or for a Brit, speaking Brit as your native, English as your native language. But anyway, the point was, I realized that somebody like Liz, who could speak French and Italian, and somebody like me that could do a little bit of German and English, was an ideal team to get this job done. She had no IT experience. I hated this job, if I'm being honest. No sooner had I been in the job for 12 months and had my appraisal and been given a bit more money, then I decided I actually wanted to leave. I wanted to leave because I realized that writing code was where I wanted to be. I felt that I could deal with a computer, I can deal with a compiler better because of the way my mind was thinking than sitting down with people and just sort of talking rubbish. So I started to, I know. I started looking for another job, and we used to have 2 magazines in the UK in those days. They were big broadsheet newspapery magazines, came out every Thursday. The first half was industry news, and the second half was jobs. Because in the 80s, IT jobs in the UK, there were literally hundreds of them. They posted every week, and you could walk into a job, within a matter of days if you needed to. Very competitive. There was, purported to be a skill shortage, but realistically, looking back on it, it wasn't so much a skills shortage as just the growth in the use of computers meant that there wasn't a skills shortage. There was a person shortage. Mm-hmm. I think it's no different to what we have today in some respects, but you just needed some good programming skills, the ability to analyze a problem, do flow charts and things like that, and create code. So I applied for a couple of jobs, and I think the second or third job I applied for, I got an interview and got a quick offer. I mean, those are the days you would phone up, talk to somebody about the job. They'd ask you a few questions. You'd ask them a few questions. If they liked you, they'd ask you to post them a covering letter and a little bit about yourself. The CV went in the postal system. By the mid 80s, that was still pretty much the way of doing it. And then if you got called for an interview, and that might be a real shocker to some of your viewers, maybe not now they're in senior positions, but some that are not in senior positions. But this is the shocker: you might be automatically put on a list to say a short list of 3 or 5 people. You'd be invited for interview. They pay for your travel expenses. You turn up. You go home. You wouldn't be out of pocket for traveling expenses, etc. You might have had a nice lunch as well out of this. And this doesn't matter where you are in the hierarchy of IT. You would be treated like this. You'd be told if you didn't get the job and why. And if you got the job, they would send a courier, a messenger bike, down to you later that day or the next morning with the offer letter. So it all seems very primitive and old-fashioned now, but you knew that if you were going for an interview and they said, you're in the shortlist of 3, that was it. You were in the shortlist of 3. They weren't pretending to you that they valued you. You would get feedback. I think it was a fairly incestuous marketplace as well, in that they knew that people that were climbing up the tree, you didn't want to necessarily be disrespectful to them, because you never quite knew when the boss would become subservient to somebody else that they perhaps disrespected at some point. There's quite a lot of that going on. So I took a job with a data processing part of a retailer in the UK. Now, this retailer had a department store chain, which is still going. I'm not going to name them because what they are called today bears no relationship to what they were called 40 years ago. But they were one of our biggest retailers, a department store, akin to some JC Penney, that kind of, if you pitch it like that, well known in every major town and city, highly regarded. And So we're coming on to the next bit of the technology, and this explains why I ended up in the financial services sector. Okay, but you have to stick with this one for a moment. We had a problem in the UK. Well, for some people it was a problem, and for others it wasn't. But for some people, the problem was shops were shut on Sundays. The law prohibited the opening of most shops on a Sunday, historically for religious reasons. Now, this is the mid-'80s. This is 1985, 86. Now, a lot of people wanted those laws changed, particularly younger people. But there were also quite a lot of people that didn't want those laws changed. But what it meant was that Saturday afternoon, when the store closed, if it had excess stock, whether it was food or clothing or fashion or whatever it was, the store managers needed to take account of that in order to make sure they got rid of that stock on Monday, particularly if it was perishable. But also, if it had been advertised heavily on TV in the week beforehand, by the time the shops are open again on Monday, this stuff isn't going to be sold unless something's happened to the price. What the store managers needed was a way of understanding what they'd sold on Saturday up to the end of Saturday, which departments, and then on Sunday they could work from home and compile a list of items to be reduced in price on Monday. So there was an expectation on Monday mornings, some of these department stores, not just this particular group, but lots of them, would be selling off things that had gone out of fashion or were not selling the week before. So some buyers would go to them with that expectation. If it was food stores, it would be a slightly different situation depending upon how perishable things were. But what the store managers couldn't do was leave the store and get this information back to them easily on a Sunday morning, except that a piece of technology had appeared on the horizon, and that is videotex. Now, again, videotex is something that's quite commonplace in lots of the world, but there are certain countries where it never really took off. The US is one country where videotex didn't really take off. But videotex was popular in Canada, for example, and it was popular in most of the the UK Commonwealth, and quite a lot of other areas that were French-speaking, German-speaking, and the Japanese market. And teletext and videotext is where it painted onto a regular television a screen, basically, 80 characters by 24 lines. It's what does subtitles. We're used to seeing it as a sort of subtitling tool now, but it used to do that with colors and blocked graphics and things like that. Now, videotext was very important in the UK. It was the original videotext was invented by our telephone, the post office, what is now British Telecom, what was British Telecom, in the early 70s. It was groundbreaking technology. But like a lot of things that get invented in Britain, we often don't have the will to globalize these things very effectively. We're either waiting for somebody to buy it, or we hope with a wing and a prayer that we'll become the world standard. The thing about videotex was we could use videotex technology to take the data from the stores that was processed on mini computers and then present it to the departmental managers of the department store in their home on a Sunday morning, just using their television and a modem.
The beach.
We would say, well, this looks really, really a bit old-fashioned and all of that. But at the time, this was absolutely groundbreaking, because it meant that those department heads could go in and look and see, like the ladies' fashion department, what had sold, the men's fashion department, what had sold, what hadn't, have we got extra stock or something? And they could go into the system and look at this information, and they could work out on the Monday morning what they were going to do with pricing. They could go in and say to their colleagues in the store, I want 25% off all of those dresses. I want 25% off all of those silk ties. I want 25% off of all of those shoes, as a way of giving the sales a nudge and getting these products out the door. Now, I don't know for certain how successful that was overall, but I'm told it was technology in a groundbreaking way. It was disruptive because no other retailer had this kind of ability, none at all. And I was very proud to be working with this company in such a technologically advanced system. In addition to this videotex system for the department store chain, we started to build a system which became known as Topic for the stock exchange in London. And this is those screens. If you watch the film Wall Street, for example, the original Wall Street, you'll see these screens where they've just got lists of prices on them and tickers. Well, videotex technology underpinned that in the London Stock Exchange. And so I found myself working on videotex systems, not only for retailers, but for the stock exchange.
So you became like an expert on that.
Yeah. I mean, this is very, very, it's incredible stuff. There was a third area, and this will have probably resonate more in the US than it will in Europe. When I explain the technology that we use, we took a thing called laser vision, which were 12-inch DVDs of their time. Laser vision was very popular in America at one point when there was a battle between VHS tapes and Betamax tapes, and somebody wanted better quality. They went for laser vision, which is basically a 12-inch DVD where you could show films and video and sound and hear sound. And what we did is for the travel industry in the UK, we came up with a system based on videotex for them to book holidays. But in order to show people in the stores what their holiday in the sun would look like, or their holiday trip to America would look like, you would put in a prompt basically saying, holidays, Florida, September, and it would come up with a list of carriers and packages. And then somebody could sit in the store in the UK. This is 1987, 86, 87. You could sit in the store. And then if somebody said, oh, that looks interesting, Florida, they could click a button on the videotex screen and it would invoke a chapter on the laser vision disc. And then it would display it in a window. So what we had then was effectively a bit like a browser, really, a browser with a picture-in-picture feature, which shows high-quality pictures.
For the late 80s, that's groundbreaking technology.
This is 87. Yeah, this is 1987. We started to develop videotex systems around the idea of using laser vision discs, which had other material on them, such as pictures of animals or pictures of places, so that you could develop a thing that said, well, I'd like to see the sort of wildlife that they have in Africa. And then you would select a number from a list. I want to see what an African elephant looks like. You click number 3 and press send, or the hash key, in fact, on those systems. And it would then show you a 30-second clip of an elephant, imposed in a window, high resolution. Now, all very groundbreaking stuff. There wasn't really a market for it in the end because people were not used to seeing it like that. They still looked at glossy magazines. They still booked their holidays over the phone with a glossy magazine in front of them. And some of this stuff didn't take off particularly. But videotex was certainly groundbreaking in the stock market in London. When London's stock market deregulated in 1987, it moved from the system of what was called open outcry. Open outcry is where people stood up with bits of paper and talked to each other, buying and selling shares. And they had, sign language and things like that. And London changed to a desk-based system, screen-based system. And Topic, which was the system that we worked on, underpinned all of that. And I was really proud of the work I did and the people I worked with. And I'm very much the junior member of the development team, but I was really, really excited. And I ended up having a meeting actually with an American chap. Now, this American was in the IT business, a chap called Richard Pick. Now, Richard Pick had developed a thing called the Pick operating system, and various versions of it still work today. But in the late 70s, he developed the system that I first worked on at Hawker Siddeley, which was actually on platform on a McDonnell Douglas mini computer. Very, very complicated. Those were the days. The point was, when I met Richard Pick, he came to the UK to sell his latest version of the software to people, to try and get them to. They wanted it to be, for mini computers and for PCs, the operating system of the future, database driven. He was unsuccessful for the large part in doing that. SQL style databases, SQL and Oracle databases largely took that market in the 90s. But the Pick operating system and Pick's relational database, in some respects, are way ahead of its time, but in other respects was just too small to succeed. But I met him at a seminar with heads of all sorts of companies. And one of those companies was one of the big 4 management consultancies in the UK. A couple of weeks later, I got a phone call from the guy I'd met there, and he said, "We'd like you to come for an interview." So I said, "Okay." And I'm thinking I'm going to be working for a big management consultancy now. And it turned out I wasn't at all. They were headhunting me for a particular job in a large property developer. Now, we got to this point. I've had almost no formal positioning in IT. I have picked up pieces of technology. I've outsourced requirements. I've worked with people, hired them. I've sat with people and learned from them. And all the way through this, I've not had a very structured career at all. But what I will tell you is this. Every single person I worked with or came across had something to teach me, whether they were teaching me how not to do something or more likely how to do something was incredibly valuable to me. And I sucked all this up like a sponge, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And when I got to this interview for this job that this management consultancy had put me forward for, there were 6 of us. Now, people think interviews are difficult to come by these days, and sometimes they're very tough. But how about this? The 6 of us in 1989 turned up at a hotel. We were told we could make one phone call to our loved one, and we were incommunicado for the next day and a half. We were not allowed to make any outside. And for a day and a half, the interview proceeded with all 6 of us competing against each other.
Wow.
I know. They have TV series about this sort of thing now. I think Trump. We've had one over here with Alan Sugar. I think Donald Trump had a series over in America. You're fired or whatever. Those kinds of things. This actually happened for a day and a half in a top London hotel, where 6 of us all competed for the same job. And I knew 2 of the other people. That was the other irony. I knew 3 of us knew each other quite well, and the other 3 had never met anybody before. Again, thrown in completely in a bizarre way. I really, by the end of this day and a half, didn't want this job at all. I still wasn't quite sure what the job was, but I still felt I didn't want it because of the pain and anger I'd gone through.
Right.
But it wasn't about IT qualifications. It wasn't about whether you could write code or not. It wasn't about whether you'd got this qualification or that. It was about your attitude and approach to solving problems.
Right.
And what better way to do that than to go up against the other 5 contenders for this job? So that ended up with all 6 of us outside the hotel, just waiting to be dropped off at homes and carried around, all looking at one another and thinking, I think I've got the job because I think the other 5 of you are rubbish. But actually, I think if you got the job, I'd try to be nice to you in case you need a deputy in the future, that kind of thing. We all none of us wanted to admit we wanted the job, but none of us thought we'd get it. But we also thought we'd get it. But how would we deal with the other 5? This kind of conundrum. Anyway, I got home. I actually got a lift to the station, or a taxi to the station. Got home. This was at the door, and she said, "You've had a messenger bike deliver a package to you." And I said, "Oh, right." Well, obviously, I come home on the train. They've got a bike, and the bike can race down the motorway. And she said, "Well, it's only just arrived." So I opened it up, and it was a letter, an offer letter, there and then. I had to sign this letter and return it within 48 hours for this job. I don't think it works like that anymore. But in a way, for senior roles, if you find somebody that's really good, test them, and then don't give them too much wiggle room. You don't want to lose a good person. Now, the other side of that coin is don't make them a ridiculously poor offer. Don't put them through this pain. Don't pump them up and then give them a derogatory package.
Right.
Because you're as a company going to have to step back and go through this process again for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. You want somebody to be engaged. The other 5 people, if they don't get the offer within 24 to 48 hours, they know they were on 2nd, 3rd, or 4th on the list. I can be certain I was first on that list of their choice because that had been biked down to my home, 70 miles outside of London, and it arrived just before I got there. Because we didn't have a fax at home at that time.
Right.
So that was the surprise. I had no choice really but to accept that job. I didn't quite know what I was letting myself in for, but it did not disappoint. Now, this was with a company called London and Edinburgh Trust. And they don't exist anymore, but they were the UK's biggest property investor and development company. And I found myself walking into the IT manager's role for this company, which was utterly amazing. We had lots of money to spend on technology, lots of really, really clever people. And the strangest thing of all that we had was a name like a company called London and Edinburgh Insurance. Nothing to do with us. And London and Edinburgh Trust had about 150 staff in the building. And London and Edinburgh Insurance had about 2,000 staff. And so next year in 1990, when spring, I was driving up to work in London and I got a call. And it was from an agent who I knew vaguely, who said, "Would you like to have breakfast with the head of Microsoft?" I thought, okay, fair enough. No big deal. We were running whatever it was, 2.3, 2 point something, or 3.1 or 3.11. We'd got, compact hardware loaded with Windows and the early versions of Microsoft Office and Microsoft Mail, as it was in those days. The product was integrated into Outlook and things like that. And I thought, yeah, and it was a breakfast meeting, and I thought, it's on the way to work. And I didn't think any more of it. I said, yeah, send me the details over. So these details arrived by fax a day later. Didn't really put two and two together. I wasn't really that interested in Microsoft as a company, to be perfectly honest. I was interested in their applications, but only as tools. I was more interested in other aspects of IT at the time. Improvements to networking, the ability to work remotely, those kinds of things. We had dumb terminals hanging off of modems for some of our people to work from home, to be able to run reports from home at the time, which again was a little bit uncommon.
And then you said Chicago in 1990, and there was already the possibility of working from home, and people had to wait for a pandemic in 2020 to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I had it all set up at home, I mean, the LET, London Edinburgh Trust, I said to them, look, I need extra phone around at home so I can run a modem. So we would run batch processes, and you had to run them sequentially. But you needed to know that the first batch had completed in a particular way before you'd run the second one, and so on. And so rather than have people sitting around in the office till 3 a.m. running these processes, I used to just link up from home and run them myself over a terminal. Well, the terminal emulator in my PC. Primitive today, but at the time it meant I could get home, have dinner, and just before I go to bed, I just run a batch, set an alarm for 3 o'clock in the morning, run another batch process, and I could deliver more just by being online to the office a few minutes or hours at weekends and during the evenings and things. So anyway, I pitched up for this breakfast thing, and the breakfast meeting was in a hotel near Basingstoke. Now, Basingstoke is near Reading, and Reading is in our technology triangle just to the west of London, and Microsoft had just built their new European headquarters there. So this chap from Microsoft that was there to open it, and was joining us for breakfast at this hotel. So I turned up at the hotel in the morning. There were about a dozen people in total, 3 or 4 people from Microsoft, and I think there were 6 of us who were Microsoft customers. As I say, we weren't a very big company. We didn't have that many PCs at the time. Probably about 50% of our staff had a PC on their desk. And I was introduced to this chap called Bill Gates. And I'm being perfectly frank with you, I had no idea who he was. I was
Bill Gates himself.
I ended up, so I was introduced.
In 1990, he must have been a billionaire already, right?
I don't know, because I at the time, it was only just during the breakfast I realized 2 things. Firstly, that who he was, the head of Microsoft, one of the founders of Microsoft. And he was quite clear about the fact he was one of the founders, not the only person involved. He was very relaxed, down to earth, which was also, refreshing. I was interested to hear what everybody had to say and all of that. And in those days, we didn't have particularly bad words to say about Microsoft. They were delivering things at a good price. They worked, etc. You know, those were quite happy times. But that's the first thing I realized is that who he was. And then the second thing is I realized I shouldn't have been there. It dawned on me, why would the head of Microsoft Corporation come to the UK to open the UK office and invite me to have breakfast with him?
Oh,
no, he wanted the person responsible for 2,000 PCs at London Edinburgh Insurance to be there. And the agent that they'd used had actually found the wrong person.
They made a mistake.
They made a mistake. So I found myself meeting what would become the world's richest man for a period of time. Very down to earth, you know, very polite, etc. His technical knowledge struck me as being very poor, but his sales and marketing approach seemed to me to be absolutely brilliant and superb. I don't know if that's a true reflection on his background, but technologically speaking, he did a lot of talking, but I didn't feel that he resonated very well with technicians in the room. But he gave a good account of Microsoft. And then 4 years after that, I lost my job at LET, and ever since then, I've been running my own business or working with senior people in helping them to run their own businesses. At which point, you are judged simply on deliverables. Can you deliver things effectively? Cost, time, budget, bug-free. And that's the only metric I have to work to these days, is getting the job done effectively.
So it's beautiful because if you look at, you're talking about the life of a technical consultant, right? A technology consultant.
Yeah.
And, you know, I still consider myself one of those people. I mean, my company, if I told my people, our last project talks about who we are. So either we make it or break it as a business, depending on the last project. So we're very careful who we work for. And once we engage into a work environment, into a project, we make sure we do whatever we can to make it as best as possible and to over-deliver all the time. Because in our culture, that's the life of the company depends on that project. Like we never did anything before in our life.
And this message, going back to the people watching this, whether they're in a senior role or in a junior role, is you should really always do the job to the best of your ability, deliver and over-deliver wherever possible. However much you hate your work, people you work with, or the type of industry you're in, if you hate things that much, then move.
Yeah.
You don't like the people you work with, move. If you're underperforming, ask yourself, are you in the right job? Because at the end of the day, you need to have a happy balance between the job you like doing and the life that you like to lead. I've been lucky that I've done things, and I still do things and projects that I find fascinating and interesting, but I only touch things that I believe I can make a difference to. And that difference might be add an innovative angle. It might be about delivering it in a more satisfactory manner that's more robust, easier to scale, or it might just be about bringing it in on time and on budget. And, you know, you have to talk to other board members and you have to talk to investors and explain to them ways that they can understand what you think is good, what you think is bad, what you think should happen, what shouldn't happen. I do get frustrated sometimes when people are just talking about things that we all know are not even past the proof of concept stage. And people are signing for things where there's actually no realistic opportunity for it to come out on time and on budget and meeting the requirements. And it frustrates me when I read about projects that have gone so badly wrong. They're late, they're over budget, they don't perform, they're full of bugs. And we have a lot of those in certain sectors in the UK, particularly in the public sector, where they're poorly managed projects. And I look at those projects and think, oh, you know, I could have done better. I always keep thinking I could have done better. But I think actually, if you don't think that, and if you don't look at these projects from outside and think, oh, could I have done better? Yes or no? You're missing a trick, because if you really feel you can do something better, then that should be your next objective, to get to a position where you can change those.
And perform, right?
Yeah.
And it comes from a basic principle. Like for every aspiring leader in technology, I tell them, I'm a man of faith. So if you look at the Bible, it says, "Do unto others as you wish them to do unto you."
Yeah.
You take that analogy and apply it to leadership. Is what you're saying. Over deliver. Look after the interest of the persons that you are reporting to, or the persons that are going to be consuming the product that you're developing, or whatever it is that you're doing. Over deliver. What would you like them to do to you if you were the one receiving the project? If you were the one coming up with the solution, right? And then things will turn in your favor eventually, right?
Yeah. And this treating people with respect. I've always tried to be very nice to people. I'm not always nice, of course. I can have a mean streak if I need to have a mean streak. And my wife will vouch for the fact that I can be quite difficult sometimes. Fortunately, she's not here tonight, so we don't have to worry about her.
Well, she's put up with me all these years, though, eh?
Sorry?
She's put up with you all these years.
She has put up with me all these years. I think she's getting a bit fed up with me sometimes, but fortunately, she has a completely different career, which takes her away sometimes from it all. She can't be doing the translating for me anymore. But I've always made it, because of my very first job, I had to go around and meet everybody in the organization, and I was subservient to everybody. At that point, I was writing reports and I was helping analyze data for absolutely everybody in the organization, and fixing computers for absolutely everybody, and plugging things in and replacing things. I've always made it my job to understand the scope of the work that's needed, the culture of the organization, who the people are in the organization that make the decisions, and who the people are in the organization that can tell you what needs to happen. And they're not the same people. I've often sat on projects where people are being constantly told what to do by the decision makers, the fund holders, and yet they are not the people that you should go to necessarily to understand what the problems are and how systems work. And I've seen people's projects fall to pieces because they've asked all the right questions of the wrong people. And to me, it's about finding out who everybody is, junior people in an organization, junior because of their experience is less in that organization, or the role is naturally a junior role, often know what's going wrong, often know what the solution might be. Tap into them, borrow from them, give them that credit later. Don't assume that the head of sales or the head of production knows what's going on at the coalface. So I do like to go around and talk to people and get a real understanding of everything that's involved in a project. And whether it's about a project that's introducing a new service, or it's a transformation project, or we're addressing some sort of compliance requirement or legislative change, you need to spend a little bit of time just understanding the whole thing. And it doesn't matter what project management methodology you're using, whether you're bringing in all sorts of tools and techniques. If you feed into those methodologies and those tools the wrong answers, you're going to get a project that doesn't work very well. So, and that's, I think, been the success I've experienced over the last 30 years, or nearly 30 years, is having that close relationship with the people that matter on the project, and never forgetting that if it's a private company you're working for, it's all about making a profit for the shareholders.
Yeah.
You're not running a charity. And if it's a charity that you're doing work for, well, first of all, I do quite a bit of pro bono work for charities, is that every cent, every penny counts in a charity. And if I do get to do much work in government, I suspect I won't get around to that. But if I would understand that everything has to be done as effectively as possible, as efficiently as possible. I might well struggle. Maybe there are some areas I shouldn't get involved with. But now, what your viewers take away from that, I don't know. There's a lot in there, but a lot of it is about not planning too precisely, because the wind blows in lots of different directions from time to time. Just seeking out any opportunity to overperform and overdeliver, and bring other people with you. always think about bringing other people, however insignificant you think they might be. Keep them on message with you, because there'll come a point in time where the thing might turn around. And I do remember a case where a very junior person I worked with ended up owning a company and running a business that I was contracted to support at one point. I never forget the day that I went into his office and realized I knew who he was. I just sort of realized, well, is this going to be an awkward situation or not? Of course it wasn't, because we'd worked and shown respect for each other so many years before. Yeah.
That's a great advice. This alone is worth everything. Don't burn your bridges and respect people.
Yeah.
Right? Turn the other cheek. Even if people mistreat you, you still respect them, and you're going to be fine, because people change and you don't know how you're going to meet each other in the future.
Yeah.
Amazing.
The other thing is that quite often the people I've found awkward, not particularly to me, but often when you're a consultant, people are not very awkward to you, but you can see that how they're awkward to their co-workers. They're not there long enough to worry about. They go. The people that they tend to be nasty towards are the people that have been in an organization for a long time who will stay there. So sometimes you can see some sort of like a storm on the horizon, but that storm sometimes just disappears very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. So don't get too concerned. Sometimes if the wrong person appears on the project for a while, that sometimes they're never there for very long. So no point losing your temper over it, getting anxiety over it. Yeah, so that's it. I think that's it. Do you have any questions?
No, I think it's been a wonderful, wonderful podcast. Yeah. There is so many good lessons about your life as and your growth as a leader. I thank you so much for your time, Adrian. The second time you provide almost an hour to us, and I truly appreciate it. The one thing I can't tell you back is your time. So I thank you on behalf of my audience.
Well, David, thank you for you joining me tonight, and also for your team for setting this up. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Adrian. God bless you. Have a beautiful rest of the week, and let's stay in touch.
Thanks very much. See you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Leaders in Tech podcast. Check in next week to keep learning how to use technology and leadership to change the game. See you next time.